Welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews, the American Film Institute's Top 100, where we critique the supposed 100 greatest American movies of all time. Join us as we decide if they're worthy of the Mott's Top 100.
Or Mott's. Welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews, the AFI Top 100. Tonight, we're doing number 60, 1933's Duck Soup. I'm Jonathan Manzer playing Chico. Hey, I'm Italian. Isn't that funny? Here with Steven Rossi as Groucho Marx.
Hey, how are you, Ian? How's it going?
Scott Thurlow as Harpo.
Beep, beep, wonk, wonk.
And Christopher Morgan as Shemp.
I'm the straight man.
Nice slip in there.
Yeah, you totally fucked me up. I'm the straight man, man.
Not no more.
Now you're Shemp.
I hate the Three Stooges.
Fake shrimp, in fact. Anyway.
All right, so Scott, would you like to give us the funny log line?
Yeah, it's just, hey, nani-nani, hey, take my wife, please. Hey, boom, the film.
Okay, and now continue talking with the plot.
Yeah, so this film builds itself. It's a Marx Brothers production, if you haven't gathered, starring all four of the Marx Brothers. And it's supposedly, quote-unquote, a political satire. So that's what it's framed as. The setup is in a sort of, like, I guess, 20 minutes into the future America, renamed Fredonia. Like, the government is failing, and the cabinet cannot decide what to do, so the obvious answer is to ask the rich duchess or whatever who's funding them what to do when she's in love or enamored by one man named Rufus T. Firefly, played by Groucho Marx, who she insists be new president / supreme overlord or whatever of their government. And then hijinks ensue for like a fucking hour. It's all Marx Brothers jokes. Ostensibly, there's a plot of the ambassador is trying to sort of cause a coup, and he sends two spies, which are the other, like, two other Marx Brothers after him. And it's all just like absurd, farcical, slapstick, jokey shit throughout. And then it culminates in like a quick war scene, and then they win the war and sing Hail Fredonia and make one last final joke. Like, that's pretty much the entire film, man. It's not a long film. It's like an hour and change.
But it's so long at the same time.
But it feels long. That is true.
Yeah, and the war they do in a montage.
Yeah, which I thought was actually kind of funny. Maybe we'll get with the style. But if we're talking about scores and plot, dude, I'm looking at a 1. Maybe I could be convinced of a 2 tops. But if you guys think that is the case.
All right, so I'm going to... First of all, there are plot lines that go nowhere. There's a femme fatale in there that is set up to try to seduce and never does.
She comes back for like 3 joke scenes and that's it.
The biggest problem I have is it felt like a Monty Python ending where they didn't know how to end a skit.
Yeah, that's a good call.
All of a sudden, they capture the ambassador at the end, and war's over because the ambassador is caught.
He surrenders.
Hey, the police catching King Arthur is much more logical.
It's about exactly as logical.
Yes. Except without the ability to pull it off like Monty Python does.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I agree with your 1 on this.
You guys think?
Yeah,
I fart in your general direction, and I agree on a 1.
You mean you fart in the film's general direction, hopefully.
I fart in the film's general direction.
I'm not sure that there is even supposed to be much of a plot to this movie. And, you know, it's a very strange thing, like, to see this as number 60 on the AFI Top 100. I can see where a lot of jokes evolved from out of it eventually.
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about this, Scott, when we watched it, and like Mel Brooks is a direct ascendant from like these types of comedies, but Mel Brooks,
he was the next generation kind of stuff.
Figured it out. Well, I guess a little bit better than they did, I think.
I just want to say, I think the most damning thing I feel is that when watching it, it seemed like I don't know much of the Marx Brothers, but it felt like recycled jokes or using an interesting framework this is, now we're going to have, to your point, the non-starter is like, we've developed this joke, which doesn't quite fit in with the plot or this long skit, like the mirror scene. Funny.
But not relevant.
But, we're going to waste 5 minutes of this film on something that didn't necessarily belong.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, what is the when you're doing a satire like this is supposed to be,
so it claims itself as, is what I'm saying.
The jokes of the movie have to play into what you're satirizing. And in this movie, I think they really don't. And that's what Mel Brooks gets right. You know, his jokes are about what he's satirizing. These jokes are like, how many one-liners can we get out in the next minute and a half in order to, like, you know, make people laugh? And, like, maybe it made people of the time laugh.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, too.
But it doesn't have anything deeper to say. Like even if you don't laugh at jokes in a Mel Brooks movie, we'll say, well, you can understand what he's trying to do, you know, and that's not necessarily the case in this one.
Well, it's funny you should say that because a couple things I did think of. Number one, if there was satire, I mean, all the slapstick killed the satire. It was number two, about Mel Brooks. One of my absolute favorite comedy is Young Frankenstein, which really, you know, is a parody of more Bride of Frankenstein than Frankenstein. But and look at that in Blazing Saddles. Like, there are good stories. There's a lot of non sequiturs in that. There's a lot of random stuff in it. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking. There's out of time humor. I'm losing the name of the word, but
out of time humor.
Out of time humor. Like, but the thing is, and we were talking about Monty Python before.
Anachronistic.
Thank you. We were talking about Monty Python before. You can see where all this stuff had come from, but I mean, it's just like the slapstick is always proportional to the rest of it, and at the heart of it, you've got a good story, and you kind of build from that. This thing, the most frustrating thing about this movie to me is I think there's a good story somewhere in here that was overshadowed.
It could have been.
Harpo Marx is the Kevin James, is the Chris Farley. No, it's that one-note character, and I kind of, you know,
Chris Farley. First of all,
all right, look, fuck you. No, I just don't. But the thing is, my point is, I don't care if you like the movie or not. You've got a character that's always the fish out of water, that is always going to fuck up any situation they are, and whether or not you find it funny is subjective. But my whole point is that's Harpo Marco's whole
Harpo Marco Polo.
Harpo Marx's whole shtick, and every time he was in the scene, it was just kind of like he became the focal point for it.
The terrifying focal point.
The terrifying.
We'll get to that,
but the thing was, I think that, like, they spent too much time on that. It's like he doesn't speak, so they had to give him. It felt like they had to give him something to do. So let's let him kick it up in the lemonade stand.
Now, here's the most modern part of this. He represented life, and life will just cut your shit to pieces.
All right.
Maybe.
But, going back to the point of you talked about the Descendants, but if you look, we rated Gold Rush very highly.
Yes, I was going to.
And Charlie Chaplin did the slapstick and satire with modern times, same era, if not before.
Yep. It's roughly the same contemporary.
He did it really well with even though modern times did have that guilt of like kind of a very loose plot, it had a plot. This doesn't. This is a clip show with a framework around it.
That's fucking exactly what I was going to say. That's my final thought is whatever plot exists in this movie exists only as gift wrapping to gift wrap their whatever skits and gags and bits and jokes they're going to do. So, one. Still. Yeah.
It's SNL the movie in 1933.
Yeah.
It's after the news SNL.
Sure.
No, it's Mad TV.
Yeah.
Chris, go on to themes.
Themes. Well, the themes are politics, I guess. I never really quite. If they were trying to make a point for this film, I mean, I'm not being sarcastic when I say this. As I said before, if there was a point to this film, it kind of got lost to me. I mean, maybe it was era-specific humor. Maybe there's more relevance that you could actually catch it without. But to me, because there was no story, because the dialogue was very quippy and was always distracted.
It was certainly rapid fire.
It was rapid fire.
I don't know if it's quippy per se, but I get what you mean.
Yeah, but it was. In other words, it was kind of hard to follow. I mean, the one thing I can say is like pissing off Mussolini a theme, because I don't know if they intended to do that, but apparently he had the film banned because they thought they were making fun of him, which I don't get.
Mussolini was just paranoid.
But like I said, this movie I found to be really, really frustrating because there is something here. I don't know. I would rewind it. At the beginning, I was rewinding it to make sure I caught the dialogue and to try to
Make sure it wasn't missing anything.
But it's just like I didn't really.
So you made this a longer movie for yourself?
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
it was a nightmare last night, dude. But
Of your own design, it seems.
Yeah, but I was
this
really
is your own fault.
No, I did it at the beginning. At a certain point in time, I kind of gave up. But I was
Okay.
really trying to get to establish what the theme was, what the plot was, what the story was, and there was nothing.
So I fought long and hard to try to decipher what they were trying to say. And the only thing I can figure out is that Groucho Marx should not be president. But there is something with like an oligarchy picking a leader, and and the pettiness of leaders can cause destruction for an entire nation. But I don't like. You're right, Chris. Like whatever they were trying to say was lost amidst Harpo being terrifying.
If they're trying to say anything at all. So, like, yeah, you can sort of pick that out, like, if you really wish to, but I don't. My interpretation is that was never intended. Like, in whatever was possibly originally intended, like you guys just said, completely is smothered by all the bits and gags that have nothing to do with the overarching quote-unquote political satire at large at all. So this film to me says nothing. It has no message whatsoever. Even if there was a kind of intent behind it, maybe, as you mentioned, one of you, Chris, maybe that perhaps audiences at the time got something more out of it, like in terms of satire for the political happenings of the time. But I don't see anything in it, and I'm just going to have to give it a 0.
Well, I would say I think that there were intended messages. Whether or not they landed is another story. But you had the idea of like oligarchies in Europe not really knowing what they're doing. Like this is just after World War I, which we have to assume is what they were kind of like talking
in
about.
theory is what they're referencing,
right?
sure.
Not just after. This is 15 years after World War I.
Kaiser Wilhelm.
But before, World War II, and so like, there's all this, like there are all these things like, all right, oligarchies don't know how to fucking run their countries, right? Like there's that they're trying to say. There's like
politicians are corrupt and disorganized.
I think like in the war montage at the end, they're trying to like portray the horrors of war, except for like if they do a fucking terrible job of it. It's like all just a joke.
In fact, it seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah,
What was
exactly.
that? Where he sent somebody out there with a sandwich board to recruit?
Yeah.
I mean, it was Harpo,
Yeah, it was
right? So I was
Harpo.
kind of hoping like shoot him, but
So like maybe that's trying to talk about like the like bizarre aspects of war, but I don't think that really landed either. I think you guys are right. I'm probably gonna give this a 0 as well, but like I think you have to at least look at like what the attempts were. And I don't think they landed, but I do think that they did have like a little more than you guys
In
perhaps
mind,
gave it
maybe.
credit for.
So, Chris, you brought up Mussolini earlier. Perhaps he banned this movie for the really offensive portrayal of Italians that Chico.
yeah.
was.
Indeed.
Yeah. So
Perhaps, but I'm just saying, like, maybe just because for us, like, we can see thematic elements in almost anything.
Right.
But I think in this case, to me, there's just nothing there. Just whatever is there is so surface level and just like, almost like happenstance that it was lost. Like whatever their intent was, got, like I said, buried under the mountain of nonstop like non sequitur jokes that happened throughout the film. So
Perhaps also Mussolini was had a close relative or something who was a mute, and he was
doubt
offended
it.
by the
That
horrible
could be true.
portrayal of mutes.
Yeah.
He
Could
had
be
a
any
fear,
Or
one-
sociopaths, apparently.
he had a
according
fear
to
of
this movie.
horns.
Sure, it could
maybe
be any
he just
one of
didn't
those
like
things.
vaudeville humor. I would ban this movie if I were him.
All right. Well,
Well, I was gonna bring up a point of a movie we saw last year, High Noon. Okay, you said,
Hi.
Ian, I think you were the one who said that it was an allegory towards McCarthyism,
Yes.
and that John Wayne found it the most unpatriotic movie, whatever. Okay, if you didn't know that was the intent, you could still get those themes out of the movie. I mean, thematically, obviously none of us grew up, in 1890s or whatever. It was
Speak for yourself.
no. My whole point is there is nothing. It was did not sound corny, but it was a timeless movie. There was no.
Sure, I get what you
you
mean.
could probably get a lot from what was popular in the zeitgeist at the time, but it's a movie that endures. It's a movie where the themes come through, even if you don't know what they're directly applicable
Yes,
to.
you do. Seriously.
Yeah, Groucho.
I'm Groucho today.
You're two in character.
You're doing a really good job, but or maybe that's.
Hey, you gotta stop. Hey.
Sorry. I'll cut it back.
No. But my whole point is, that's Scott's job. Scott, put your knee on.
All this is getting cut out of the review.
Oh no,
sure.
it's not.
Go on.
No, what I'm saying is being error specific does not excuse the fact that you could not get the themes out of this. Is my whole point.
I agree. Okay, and on to me with the antagonist. So theoretically, it's Ambassador Trentino of Slovenia.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I guess, right?
He antagonized Groucho Marx, sort of. I don't think anything actually antagonized Groucho Marx because he's too oblivious to the world.
Whatever antagonism he was feeling from the ambassador, he gave it back to him like 3, 5, 10-fold.
Yeah. I was certainly antagonized by the Marx Brothers.
Yes. I know there's going to be your jokey answer. It's like, sure, again, the film, as it sets up whatever, like, the bare minimum plot elements that it has, sets up Ambassador Tarantino, as the villain, if you will. Mm. But, like, again, it's all, he comes in and out of the film. He seems to have some various plan. You mentioned, like, he has a femme fatale, like, working with him and under him, right? To infiltrate and get whatever state secrets he wants. But, like, that shit's there, and then it's completely ignored in the service of a 20-minute, like, montage reel of jokes, and then it sort of comes back and is mentioned once.
Oddly enough, we talked about Mel Brooks. He reminds me of Hedley Lamar from Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, sure.
And that's who he was intended to be.
Yeah.
But he was nowhere near as effective as that.
I agree. Even like within that stereotype, like caricature role, I don't think he was all that effective. So
you're no Harvey Korman, man.
Probably going to 0.
And not as effective as Hedy Lamar. Yeah, no.
Hedley.
No. Hedy Lamar is a
little
different.
There's a.
God damn it! Never mind. Anyway, yeah, I agree with you guys. The Trentino was kind of a lackluster straight man to Groucho Marx throughout this movie, and it was not good. That's it.
Very well said.
I mean, there's not much more to say. You guys have, discussed a little bit more already, but it just wasn't an interesting character.
It was completely flat.
It wasn't an interesting character. It was a character who was there to bounce jokes off of.
Yes, sometimes literally, if you will.
And that's it. And so.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Do seg.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Stephen, continue talking. Oh, that was zeros for everyone, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Zeros all around.
Talk about the protagonists.
All right, so I guess Firefly is supposed to be the main protagonist, right? I'm probably going to put him as the sole protagonist, actually.
I would also do that same thing.
Just because it's a Marx Brothers movie doesn't mean that they're all protagonists, I don't think. And I'm not sure what I'm going to give this, not because I particularly liked the character, but he was the only thing in this movie that moved it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always, I feel, accidentally. Or...
yeah, but that's not a mark against the character. That's how the writing drew him up. And, I don't think that it was a black mark against that character for that reason. And he the plot of this, what plot there was moved forward because of his actions, as
haphazard as
cruel
they may have been,
ridiculous as they may have been.
Sure.
So I'm very close to a 0, but I think I'm leaning towards a 1 right now. So I'll open up the floor. Any of you may make me change my mind here.
All right. See, it's really funny that you should say that, because I'm having the same frustrating part of it, because he's the closest character that I actually liked, and that part of my frustration was every time I'd start, he would have been more of an effective protagonist if they didn't keep undercutting him by doing something else. Like, first of all, Rufus T. Firefly is probably my favorite aspect of the movie. The name. I think that's a great name.
Just the name.
The name is great. I love the name. But in terms of the character himself, I'm right where Steve-O is because he's definitely the protagonist. But the thing is, I don't know if he's effective because he's being continuously undercut by all the other fakakta nonsense that's going on there.
But also enacting his own fakakta nonsense, if you will.
He's concocting around himself.
He's an agent of chaos. And in that way, he has no agency.
No, I like that. That's funny, but also I think well said.
Yeah, really well said.
He can't help but cause destruction and do every single emotional whim he has. And to me, that makes him an ineffective protagonist because, again, there's no... That driving force is accidental at best, or just the product of his wake, and of course that's why I think the big faults of this film are in is because we're just watching a chaotic wake.
Yeah, that's pretty well said. So I was gonna give him like the softest of all ones because of course, yes, I agree that he's the sole protagonist. The other's probably supporting, and we said the villain, quote unquote, already. So, like, yeah, I don't particularly like him as a character either, but that is an interesting point where he's sort of just pulled along and just randomly, like, on whims of others and his own whims, causes just destruction and all chaos, like you said, around him and for him and of himself.
I'm going to make two comparisons to similar type of... Three Stooges. I know you don't like Three Stooges. Moe, as much as he is a buffoon, like all the other Three Stooges, he has... drives, he has intentions, he has things, goals he wants to achieve.
I see what you mean. I can see the difference.
And Laurel and Hardy, in a similar fashion, they're the buffoons and they cause chaos, but again, they have motivations. I don't know what Rufus T. Firefly's motivations are. He didn't even want to be president
or whatever.
Aside from, oh, you want to be president? Sure, I'll be president. Oh, I'm going to want to sleep with this woman. Oh, I want to...
sleep with her and get her riches as well. You're right. It's all just random. So, like, I mean... I might give it like the softest of... I agree with everything we just said, which seems to like point me towards giving it a 0. But I think there might be like... I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's still just enough. Like, he has some agency. He has more than most, maybe. Like, it's strange to me. Like you said, Chris, it's frustrating to like try to parse this one out. But I sort of like instinctually want to give him like just enough of the softest of ones that as I often say ever. But as you said, I agree almost fully with the assessment and the analysis you've made of his character just now. So I don't know. You got anything else to add?
I don't think that I do. I think I may have been convinced on your last push there, Ian, to give this a 0.
I mean, certainly Groucho has a personality.
Based on what Scott just said, because thinking about it, I think there are characters with more agency than him. And I'm going to go into that in the next question. But yeah, based on that, I think I'm going to give this a 0.
I might also do that. Like I said, I was debating it. Like somehow I wanted to give him a 1 going into it because Groucho certainly has lots of personality as a person within this, but at the same time, it's not like maybe a personality you want to hang out with for more than 10 minutes. So like,
I wouldn't want to spend 2 minutes with that.
So like, I think I might go with a 0.
Your agent of chaos with no agency was a perfect description. I'm giving him a 0 too.
I loathe this movie, by the way, so I'm going to do everything.
I think it shows, but yeah.
All right. Scott.
Sporting, yes.
Sporting, yes.
Yeah, so I guess we'll call it the other two Marx Brothers, Harpo and Chico, right? Like, ostensibly they're spies or like agents for the ambassador who are trying to infiltrate Rufus T. Firefly / Groucho's organization, cabinet, whatever. But like, they spend the most of it like not spying. In fact, bitching at each other how they're not actually spying, and also like fooling the ambassador about not doing their job.
30 minutes at the peanut vendor.
Yeah, like the peanut, dude, the peanut gag thing was like almost insufferable. Eventually, like I couldn't stand it. Yeah, no, you're right. It was. At first, I'm like, all right, whatever, this is fine. Maybe this will go on for another minute or two. Like,
I was so happy when they tipped
like,
the peanut stand over.
Christ. So like, you're probably gonna say, like,
this is done.
Yeah, Sibo, you're probably just implied, or to me, I gathered that they had more agency,
Yeah, I think they did.
right? But like they were ostensibly being directed by the ambassador. Go spy on Firefly for us.
But they didn't give a shit about what anybody told
Yeah,
them.
exactly. They spent most of the time
Agents of
thinking
Chaos
around.
as well.
Yeah.
The Marx Brothers as a whole are
Sure,
just
collectively, yes.
However, they
To
had
the Chaos crew.
it seemed that the two of them had goals that
Some
they
kind
were
of
driving
motivation,
towards.
yeah. Sorry.
Whereas like
Yeah.
Groucho was just like, I'm gonna just say
Harpo
that-
wanted you to hold his leg.
I'm just gonna say a pun that fucking comes into my head. Like the two of them were like
Yeah, man.
like Harpo was constantly leaving Groucho behind on the fucking motorcycle, and like I kind of like that as like I'm gonna fuck up his shit. Like like that was kind of what I got out of that.
I guess.
But also, just to go back to the Laurel and Hardy thing, there is that kind of feel of where Chico's playing more of the straight man there,
Yeah,
more of the directed individual, where Harpo is the person who's constantly dragging him or getting him into situations.
Ridiculous situation, sure. So like they were like, then you got, I suppose the other ones is the femme fatale we mentioned. I'm sorry to remember her name in the film at all.
Vera.
And then the
Mrs.
secret
Teasdale.
Mrs. Teasdale, the money behind the scenes,
Yeah.
who is the wealthy heiress, I suppose, that Groucho was interested in.
Who perhaps had the most intention of the movie.
Yeah, like she was like the most routed character. So like I enjoyed her whenever she was on screen, because at least it grounded the film to some degree for little bits and pieces at a time. It's like, I don't know, they were entertaining, but then also grating. Like, it's so hard to describe. At least Harpo and Chico, that is, as characters and as their bits and gags.
I just need to give this rant right now.
Go
I
ahead.
apologize.
Go for it. I grant this time to you for ranting.
Harpo is nightmare fuel.
Yeah. He's Nightmare
is-
Fuel incarnate.
He is the scariest thing I've seen in a
I
very
do like that.
long
The
time.
clown without the makeup and the nose.
His dead stare, his insistence for you to touch his leg.
And compulsively cut off pieces of people's clothes, I suppose.
Oh my god.
If you could put him in a horror movie, and
And
it
he'd
would be
fit right in there.
fantastic.
No, I agree. Like, someone should make that film.
Oh,
Revenge of Harpo Marx. But I think I might like at least I'll say this. Collectively, these side characters were at least entertaining to a better degree than anything else in this. Even if, again, like the gags went on too long, or they weren't as funny as perhaps they were in 1933. But I will think I'm going to give this film credit on the supporting character front, specifically for Miss Teasdale, and some of the gags between Harpo and Chico.
Yeah, I'm gonna also give this a 1 for supporting characters for most of the reasons that Scott just said. I think that they were more directed than Groucho was, and more interesting than
They had more pathos, as Chris
what
might
was
say.
his name? Trentino was, and I will give them actually a fairly strong 1 to supporting characters, because I think that there was a lot of let's just I want to say interesting, but I also don't want to say interesting because I don't think it was all that interesting.
Right.
But like, there's a lot of thought put into these characters, I think, and like who they were, especially some of the other. Like, honestly, Mrs. Teasdale, I did not like her actress, but I thought that the character was pretty solid.
I see what you mean.
So I'm gonna give supporting 1.
I just have one last thing to say. This is my first Marx Brothers movie I've ever seen, but I knew of
The Genesis
Groucho and
of it,
Harpo through kind of cultural osmosis.
Sure.
Groucho turned out to be disappointing. Harpo, as I mentioned, is turned out to be frightening, and that's what's got me left with at this film. What a fascinating
impression,
character I felt this was, and I don't understand how anyone ever found it funny, unless they were too scared not to laugh.
Perhaps.
So I'm too scared not to give him a 1.
Very nice.
I'm giving him a 0. I thought that the film seems very disparate and just disjointed, and I'm going to say it's because they that terrifying creature you spoke about was the complete distraction of the film. Every time they had to cut away for be quiet. Okay, so he goes and fucks with the piano, and it's just like, I mean, yeah, maybe now after how almost entire not quite a wholesome, but 80 years of like having the descendants of this humor come down. But as a film, judging it as a film, as a piece of narrative, I did not get anything because I felt like any bit of connective tissue there was, any motivation of any character was undercut because you had to service this shtick.
Chris, he's behind you right now.
He's cutting off your coattails right now.
I'm glad. Too bad I don't have my mullet any longer. But
that would have been gone.
Yeah,
Harpo heard you say that.
It would have done the world a favor.
You made a really
the final scene.
You made a really good point there, but I still think I'm sticking with the 1. But that was kind of close to almost flipping me because I do see your point. All right, like judging it on as it is within it, but I still think for me it would they all worked well enough relative to all the other aspects of the film.
I feel like the final scene should have been Harpo being the real spy and slicing Groucho's throat
Oh,
That's the alternate director's cut
with
ending.
his scissors.
Sure. Well, anyway.
Anyway,
right.
so 3 1s and a 0.
Mhm.
So, Chris, on to dialogue.
Oh boy.
Hey, no.
Hey, no. Hey, this is really interesting because, as I said before, at the beginning I had to keep rewinding it because I want to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
You didn't have to.
Right, I know. That's why I stopped doing it after a
We're
while.
missing shit.
There's a lot of nonverbal cues, which I know that we sometimes give credit for.
But not here.
No,
Sometimes.
I have to say, and I don't want to sound like a one-note. I don't want to sound one-note because, ironically enough, that's how I felt about this film. But the film just never gelled for me. It didn't, and there were some time. The thing that was irritating me about this is, they would have a very clever gag, some very clever dialogue in a sentence or just a quip or whatever, and I'm like, that's clever. Whether or not I've heard it before, I'd appreciate it. And then like what was said next or done next would undercut it because, and I'm like, you're grabbing onto that because I was like, okay, and you're like, wait, and it's gone now because everything in this film is fleeting, and the film is very, very frustrating. So I want to give it a 1 because I for the parts I thought were clever, but by the same token, if I can't follow what's going on verbally, the only time you can follow something is non-verbally, and it's the same shtick that they're having to service all the time. I don't know if I can give that credit. I just don't think I can give any dialogue in this film credit, even though some of it I liked.
Sure. So, like, I guess the question is this, right? Like, does it hold up with like the stick that it's based around? And obviously, I think we're all agreeing it doesn't really. So, the question of dialogue obviously lives or dies upon whether or not you thought all this stuff landed. And maybe it's just, again, unfortunately, or for the film, it seems, the evolution of comedy, if you will, from where it was and where we are now. It's almost like you've heard all this shit before. Yeah, for a reason, probably because of them. But that means that it doesn't sound, it's not as fresh or as original or as amusing or entertaining at this point, trying to go back and watch it. So, like, I'm looking at anything that I think was positive for the jokes, especially like the rapid fire back and forth, I think is more almost style, and I'll have more to say about that in a second. But I think dialogue, I'm going with a pretty solid 0 because it didn't land. Like, yeah, you sort of can step back, like you said, Chris, and like appreciate it for like what it was and did, even if you don't personally find it funny. But I think a lot of that I'm going to ship over to style and give the actual dialogue because, again, there's no, as we said about plot, it's almost the same thing. Much of the dialogue is just them making jokes, not like talking about what's actually happening. So
there is a I forget what it is. Like it's called the 5-second rule or something like that. In when you're writing comedy, I think this is specifically for TV shows, but I feel like the Marx Brothers were like, "What is how short of a time we make
maximum
like,
number of
we're
jokes.
a 1.5 second rule, and like you just like throw out joke after joke after joke after joke after joke, and if 1 out of 10 lands when you do 10 in 20 seconds, I guess it's good. But like,
it's a good ratio.
In terms of this, you see a bunch of jokes not land, and probably a decent proportion of those are just because we're, watching this 80 years after it came out.
Yeah, for sure. Like,
85 years after it came out.
Can't help
whatever
that,
it
but
is.
there it is,
But at the same time, it's like, Jesus, come on, man! Like you need to insert some plot. Like I think they could have inserted some plot into the jokes, which they didn't really do.
Exactly,
like the jokes, the plot was all through dialogue outside of the Marx Brothers, and I think that was a mistake. I think that some of their jokes should have like spoken to the plot, things like that, which they like very rarely did, and only tangentially a lot of times.
Yeah.
So I think that the dialogue is probably going to get a 0 from me.
So I can't rate this objectively. I can't view this through how it helped further comedy, because I didn't enjoy watching this film. And I'm going to give it a 0. I just subjectively, it just was a chore to watch.
Yeah. So before you go on, like as a transition, like as I mentioned, what you just said there, like how it influenced comedy, I'm giving all those points of style that we're coming up to and taking it away, like not giving it credit on dialogue here.
Yeah, I think
my final thought.
Probably do the same thing.
Well, I'm not going to do the same thing.
Okay.
I'm going to actually tell about the jokes I felt worked.
Okay.
There's a scene where Chico and Harpo are dressed up like Groucho in his sleeping
Scrooge pajamas.
Going through the mansion of Teasdale, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they come across I guess, open door that they think is a mirror.
Well, I thought it was a mirror, and then he breaks
a mirror,
it.
He breaks the mirror, and then they go through it.
Yeah.
Or one of them goes through it. Somehow all the mirror fucking pieces
doesn't matter.
Aren't on the ground.
It's a intro to improv class where you have to do the mirror motion, and they do it for a very long time. It stops being funny. It comes back to being funny. I thought it worked. There's also in the war scene, like, they keep coming in with different periods of
like uniform.
Yes.
Yeah.
Clever. Also, Harpo has sex with a horse at one point.
He does. I like the horse. The horseshoes underneath the bed was a nice touch.
With a horse and another lady friend.
Basically, it's implied. Kind of.
I thought it was an orgy involving a horse. It doesn't matter.
No,
of the horse?
Rapey.
Well, they were in 2 different beds, and Harpo and the horse were in one, and she was in the other one.
Right.
So who knows what happened?
Doesn't matter. But yeah, right. It's kind of a funny gag. Funnier.
It should matter, though. And it doesn't. And that's most of what I feel this movie is. So I'll probably give it a 0.
Style-wise. All right. Well, I guess you're right there.
That's awesome. All right. You're 2 for 2 tonight, buddy.
Just 2 for 2, though.
No. I mean, in terms of like landing on these awesome.
We got it.
I understand.
Do you really?
No. What?
No. Please spend more time doing it.
Okay.
Go ahead. What are you gonna say, Scott?
I was just gonna say, like, we mentioned this precast after the film, you and I, Steve-O, and mentioned it to you guys just before as well, that you can see the evolution of comedy. Like all the slapstick, like ridiculous stuff, kind of starts here. In the same like contemporary, like you mentioned Chaplin as well, and Lauren Hardy and everything, like that kind of stuff. And then I think you go a little bit more than generation is Mel Brooks is like the next successor, and then you sort of get from that like something like Family Guy. Like this reminded me of like the Family Guy style of humor, which is rapid fire shit over like cut to random stuff, random references, but just like update it for the new the modern generation.
And then you hit on one joke and drive it into
and like
the
you
ground.
said, like the mirror thing is like it was funny, then it stops being funny, that sort of becomes funny again. So like they sort of, if not invented that kind of thing, like at least made it a part of the cultural consciousness. So I will give it credit on that. The style itself is fine. Like it's all served the jokes that they were going for. Whether or not you like those jokes, I think it made sense the way they had them framed and shot and so forth like that. There was no like Kubrick style like cinematography or anything clearly, right? So like, but I still it works for what it is, and I will give the credit. Like I believe we might get to like should this film be on the list, and if so, should it be this number in a second? But I think it's culturally important because of the style of comedy that they sort of codified is maybe the word I'm looking for. And yeah, we've moved beyond it by now, of course, but it had to have come from somewhere, and you can still see its echoes here and there in that kind of slapsticky stuff throughout. So
Rodney Dangerfield would not exist without Groucho Marx.
Yeah, sure, exactly. And other things like that. So I'll like I said, whatever credit like that I took away on dialogue, I'll give in style because sort of its legacy and where it stands in the pantheon of comedy, whether or not, as I said, and as we all said, it still particularly does or does not work at this day and age.
I completely agree with that, Scott. I think that I am going to give this a fairly strong one for style, just because you can see the echoes of this throughout time, throughout comedy, and like there are things that I find really funny now that, as you mentioned with Rodney Dangerfield, would never have existed without the Marx Brothers, and without this movie in particular. I know like influenced a lot of people that came later. So I think that, and not only that, but like you can see the beginnings of kind of a, like you can see where this would have like influenced the zeitgeist, and like,
Yeah, sure, exactly.
at the time it would have been like, okay, well, here we are talking about
If we were 10 years old at
War,
the time, we would
like,
endlessly quoting the dumbass jokes.
in between two wars, like this is something that was a big influence on pop culture, and
It wasn't, though. It became later. That's what's interesting. Groucho Marx hated this film.
that doesn't make
No,
there's a lot
but-
of people hate films that they do.
No, but it's not just that. It's that it didn't become popular until later on when critics reassessed it.
Interesting.
Really.
So that whole argument of the zeitgeist of the time is actually
It was like sort of
flawed.
forgotten a bit at the time.
No, it's not, because it doesn't need to be accepted in its time to be part of the zeitgeist of its time.
Fair enough.
That's, I suppose, true, but
Like that's the whole argument that what's like fucking some of the biggest painters in
Sure,
history
sure.
weren't accepted in their time. Like this captured something that was going on at the time, and whether or not, like, I can't ever properly say whether this captured the feel of like
Unless we were
post
there
World War
in
I, pre World War
1933,
II.
Did
Like-
it, Chris?
What'd you say?
See, that's a better joke than the entire movie had.
Home run, man. You got it, man.
but-
Hey, is your refrigerator running? Hey, you better go catch it.
But no, like
Ian for the hat trick tonight, man.
being able to, I think just in terms of being able to see echoes of this movie throughout history from then until now, 80 years later, and like what it's done, I think I have to give it credit for style.
If this were the only Marx Brothers movie, I would agree with you. Because I know I gave a lot of leniency for some of the stuff we did around Halloween. But you could look at each one of those 6 Universal monsters and say, hey, but this was that. The Marx Brothers had many movies. They had TV show and everything. I have to look at this work as a piece of narrative. If it were by
Standalone.
itself,
Yeah.
if it were the only Marx Brothers movie, I would agree wholeheartedly with you guys. This is not a good movie. Me personally, and apparently Groucho thought the same thing. I think Night of the Opera, I was just trying to see if Night of the Opera is on the AFI. I remember seeing part of that when I was a kid. I look forward to giving them another chance. I personally do like Groucho. I've seen
Him in concert.
him in every.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
right.
saw him live.
I've seen him live.
Gotcha.
No. But generally speaking, but this particular work as one of many of a body of work of the Marx Brothers, no, I'm not giving it any credit for style. I didn't
And
like the style of this movie.
I see what you mean. It's a respectable angle to take for sure. That's a good point about like it being like if it existed in a vacuum and they didn't do a bunch of other stuff as well along with it.
Right.
Yeah. I'm still sticking with one, but it's a good point.
And now I'm very interested in. Chris, you have a point?
No, I was going to ask, did you give style a 1 or a 0?
I give it a 0.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So this is interesting to me.
Good.
What are we going to do for recommendations? Starting with Steven.
I'll say this. I'm not going to recommend this movie, but it's number 60 on the AFI Top 100. It's clearly an important part of
American
film,
culture,
American
sure, but-
film history, especially comedy. If you are interested in the history of comedy, in the history of film and especially comedy, it's probably something that you should watch. If you are a standard human being, don't watch it.
or even a substandard one.
So I'll give it a 0.
Yeah, no, actually, because Chris had just mentioned what he mentioned, so I'm not recommending Duck Soup. I would probably recommend like watch some other Marx Brothers stuff, like watch some, like you said, like the TV show that they had going, like or something like Night of the Opera, or what, like some other stuff that they've done, because this one I think is like a weaker representation of their style of stuff. While it's still like a perfect representation of what they did, I don't think it's as strong compared to the other works that they produced while they were working in comedy. So I don't think it should be on the AFI list. I think it should be way back. Like I say this a lot. They could bump off Ben-Hur. They can bump off Ben-Hur for a lot of other movies, but they should put this like back in the 90s or like maybe at 100 or something.
I don't know
Yes,
if it should
like
be
you
on
said,
the list.
I don't know either.
if it's going to be, I've said this before, but if this movie is going to be on the AFI list, it should be way down at the end. Much more. It shouldn't be 60.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Do the Right Thing was lower on the list than this is.
The
I
right
think so,
thing
yeah,
was like
like
90
90
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, never mind.
So you know what I'm saying? So like, I'm giving a 0 for recommendation.
Such a weird
Here.
comparison, though.
But all I'm saying is like, yeah, we can give it credit for like its cultural significance, but it shouldn't be as highly regarded. And other works of theirs, I think, are probably better and more enjoyable.
You said before, sorry, I was doing the math. Night of the Opera is on the
I
AFI.
I don't know offhand.
I believe it
think
is.
I don't know. I
is,
was
though.
trying to look it up before.
We unfortunately did not double check that beforehand.
I
But
hear that's like their masterpiece
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. So if there's two
Even if it
Marx
isn't on the
Brothers
list,
movies
yeah.
on the list, yeah, that's maybe too many.
You're going to go out on a limb and say, watch the other one?
I'd rather see something else by them because I despise this movie and it
yeah, that's what I'm
almost
saying.
turned me off from ever wanting to watch another Marx
Hmm.
Brothers work.
And Night of the Opera has Crusoe doing De Quella Pira, so you know.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Everybody knows what that means.
Well, no, I'm just saying that if you're in opera, you know.
Okay.
So what does that leave us in Duck Soup?
Not good.
Well,
Not great. That's what it leaves us.
Scott and Steve-O, you were the most generous people here
Yeah, I know.
with 3.
Mm-hmm.
I gave it a 2, and Chris,
Curmudgeon of the night.
Did you give it a
Hates
duck
it.
egg?
yeah, he gave it a 1.
Didn't give
Oh,
it a
one?
duck egg. Didn't give it a duck egg.
Oh, that's right. He gave one the plot. That's right.
2.25 overall.
Yeah, man. Like maybe it's not reflective of like. It is reflective of what we thought of it in its quality in that regard.
Mhm.
It just, I guess we are who we are, and existing the time we're existing in. So we've moved on from this style of comedy, and it's just, as we just said, it's probably not even one of their best works.
I'm interested to see why they resuscitated this film. And what at that I want to look more into at that point.
Why it was chosen.
Yes.
Yeah.
What? Oh, in 2007? Well, I think it was.
No.
It was probably on the original list in 97.
Yeah, but there's a point in history where it had fallen off, and then it was re-examined by
what sort of like
critics
resurfaced it
and made it more of an important film. And I want to know what their arguments for it were. Because it's not what was at that time of making the film that's important,
No, that's
but
true,
what
you're
at
right.
that time which they saw. What president was like Groucho Marx?
What
that
were they
said,
thinking? Yeah.
was like,
Sure, it's an interesting question, but I mean, we're giving it a 2.25, and hey, man, that's how it lies on our
LBJ,
scale.
maybe?
LBJ. I don't know what that means in terms of this.
No,
movie.
Lyndon Johnson?
I was originally going to say Lyndon B. Johnson.
Did you both try to correct me?
No, I was going to.
I don't know what LBJ
Wait,
means.
it was.
I don't know what it means
Lucky
in terms of
blowjob,
duck
obviously.
soup.
Anyway,
I was going to say one of the Roosevelts. I can't remember. I
It
can't
doesn't
keep
matter.
it to them.
we'll never know for sure.
Oh wait, no.
All right, so is everyone done talking about this movie?
I think we've
I
talked.
am.
I think we've talked more than necessary about this movie.
I'm Jonathan E. Menzer here with Stephen Amosi,
Sometimes a bad movie is just a bad movie.
Scott Thilla,
Do not watch this movie.
Christopher Morgan.
Good night.
I don't even have a joke. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.